Welcome to Standard 12C. In this standard, we will describe Cold War conflicts, that's really wars, and revolutionary movements that took place in Asia and their major leaders. Some essential understanding to help with this standard. After World War II, the main priority of the United States was to stop the spread of communism. And that resulted in a policy we call containment, to stop the spread of something. Again, if you think of the word containment like the word container, as long as a liquid stays in a cup or jar or a mug, that liquid doesn't pose a danger to anything around it. But once it's out of the container, then it can spread. The United States really wanted to do the same thing to communism, to keep it bottled up so it couldn't spread to other countries and other areas. So after World War II, the main policy focus of the United States was containing communism. This, in the years right after World War II, was mainly focused on Europe, but is going to spread to Asia. An important definition to understand for this standard is what we call the domino theory. And the domino theory, as illustrated there in the dominoes, is the belief behind the policy of containment that goes along with the Truman Doctrine, that said if one country were to turn communist, that all the surrounding countries would soon follow. As you see there in the diagram, if China becomes communist as it does in 1949, that would spread communism into Korea in the 1950s and Vietnam, and that would continue to spread throughout Asia. So the domino theory really is important to understand the motivation of this policy of containment, that if you didn't stop communism in one country, it would soon spread to all the neighboring countries. And one last piece of essential understanding. In order to carry out this policy of containment, the United States developed a lot of alliances, friendships with other countries in the region to help contain Soviet and Chinese aggression. In other words, in order to contain communism, the United States needed help. And that desire to contain communism in Asia, to keep it from spreading, resulted in conflicts in Korea and Vietnam. So our essential understanding, we're asking the question here, what happens in Asia during the Cold War? And we're going to focus on three particular events that take place during the Cold War in Asia. The first of these events is the Chinese Civil War. And the Chinese Civil War begins in 1927 and goes until 1949. It was a struggle between communists led by Mao Zedong, who you see pictured there at the top, and nationalists, non-communists, led by Chiang Kai-shek, who you see there at the bottom. This went on through much of the 1930s. The two sides actually take a break during World War II from fighting each other to fight against the Japanese invasion of China during World War II. In this case, the enemy of their enemy was their friend. They came together to fight against the Japanese, but when Japan was defeated in 1945, the two sides go back to their conflict with each other. And 4 years later, Mao Zedong and the communists come out victorious. The communists win, and they established the People's Republic of China, what we sometimes call mainland China. The big China that we know today was established as a communist country as a result of the Chinese Civil War. Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalists, though, they're going to flee mainland China, the People's Republic, the communist China, and leave for the island of Taiwan. We see there on the map mainland China, the People's Republic of China in purple, and the island off the coast there of Taiwan was established as the non-communist Republic of China. Tensions remain very high between these two countries today. The United States has an alliance with Taiwan. There's a lot of diplomatic tensions between these countries, and even some threats of military action as well. But these are all legacies and results of the Chinese Civil War that ended back in 1949. Another conflict that takes place in Asia during the Cold War is the Korean War, which it really is an example of the domino theory that the United States feared, that the Soviet Union spread communism into China, and China right next door to Korea. Then 1949, China becomes communist. 1950, we see communism spreading on the Korean peninsula. After World War II, Korea, which at one time was just Korea, but had been occupied by Japan, and it was divided at the 38th parallel into a communist North and a non-communist South, okay, North Korea and South Korea. In 1950, the communist North is going to invade the non-communist South. Okay, so the reddish part there, North Korea is communist, the green part is non-communist South Korea. Policy of containment dictates that the United States is going to help any country that's fighting against communists. South Korea was fighting against communists, so the United States, along with allies in the United Nations, the United States leads a multinational force to help South Korea fight against communist North Korea. The war goes, initially the North Koreans drive the South Koreans very far south on the peninsula. The Americans and the UN forces arrive and push the North Koreans almost all the way up to the far north of the Korean peninsula, at which point communist China gets involved, and they're going to push the Americans and the UN forces pretty much back to where the war began. Okay, so 3 years of conflict, millions and millions of people killed, and in 1953 the war ends with the border established back at the 38th parallel where it had originally been put. From the U.S.'s point of view, this is a success of containment. Okay, there was communism in North Korea. That communism tried to leak into South Korea. The United States and its allies responded and put the communism back into North Korea. Just like the Republic of China and the People's Republic of China, tensions remain very high today between both North Korea and South Korea. Okay, and our third event in Asia during the Cold War we'll look at here briefly is the Vietnam War. And Vietnam had been a French colony before World War II, occupied by Japan. France tries to reestablish its control of Vietnam, or French Indochina, as it was called. In 1954, the French are kicked out, and it's kind of same scenario as we saw in the Korean Peninsula. It's divided along the 17th parallel, the 17th line of latitude, into a communist north and a non-communist south. In the 1950s, we see the invasion of South Vietnam by the communist north, led by Ho Chi Minh. And we begin to see this intervention by the United States. Initially not as forceful and not as direct as in Korea, but a kind of a slow build of U.S. support for South Vietnam against this invasion from communist North Vietnam. And over time, the United States becomes more and more deeply involved with more and more soldiers and more casualties in this war. This war goes on for a number of years. As you'll learn in your U.S. history classes, this had very profound effects on American society. It was a bitterly divisive war that left a lot of hard feelings on both sides of the conflict. But 1975, the war ends with the U.S. withdrawal from Vietnam. Unlike Korea, which today is divided into a communist North and non-communist South, the Vietnam conflict ends with Vietnam unifying as a communist country. There is no North Vietnam and South Vietnam today. It's one country and a communist country. And that concludes what we need to know for the standard.